All right, here we go. Still moving quickly. Just to recap, the Republicans were very popular in the South with farmers, with anybody who lived in a small population area, because those people did not get protected by the tariff and didn't want a national bank. They wanted the government to leave them alone. Federalists, on the other hand, this is the same group that got the Constitution passed. This is the same group that believed that we needed a strong central government to fix the problems. The problems aren't going to fix themselves. After all, under the Articles, we had a weak government that created the problems. So these guys are all about holding the country together. They're all about fixing issues. They're about presenting a strong picture to the rest of the world. The Federalist Party is not going to last much longer because they're going to make some pretty huge mistakes. But in our early stages, they were kind of necessary to get us off the ground and get us rolling. Their number one leader is Alexander Hamilton, but he's not going to run for president because he makes some very dumb mistakes personally. They're going to be popular with merchants and factory workers whose jobs and money is going to be saved by that tariff. It's going to protect American industries, so factory workers keep their jobs, and it's going to make American products cheaper than foreign products, which makes merchants a lot of money. So these guys are also going to be really popular in the North because the North is making factories and the South is staying plantations. So we already start to see the divide between North and South. All right, so in the actual election, the Federalists start out with a huge advantage because George Washington, he hates political parties, so he is not officially a Federalist, but the things George Washington got done and wanted lined up better with the Federalists. So George Washington appears to be supporting the Federalists. That changes when the Democratic Republicans actually create a newspaper called the National Gazette for the sole purpose of fake news. They want the whole country to know that the Federalists are going to ruin your lives. They're going to betray the Constitution. They're going to betray the government, and they're going to set up a brand new king, and that king's name is going to be Alexander Hamilton. And they point to the national bank as a power grab. They point to the tariff as a way to destroy the lives of Southerners. They point to their decision to support England as support of the British king. So they're saying, they're putting all these links together and saying, dear Americans, the Federalists want to ruin your life. The Federalists want to ruin America. Nothing could be further from the truth. But again, back then, people read magazines. People read newspapers, so it got a lot of traction. Other things that they disagreed on, very basic stuff. The Federalists wanted a national bank run by the federal government. They wanted a high tariff to protect American goods and make money for that strong government. And they favored England in the war between England and France, which seems like a dumb thing to do because France was our best friends. They helped us win the war against England. But England was our major trade partner. Even when we were colonies of England, we traded all our stuff to England. So we still trade with England a lot, and to irritate England would cause trade problems, make us gather less money from our tariff, get less goods, and would cause prices to go up even more. The Republicans, on the other hand, wanted no national bank. They felt the banks should be controlled locally. They wanted no tariff because the tariff caused prices to go up for farmers. And they favored France because France helped us in the Revolution. And Thomas Jefferson spent most of the Revolution in France, getting France to help us. So Thomas Jefferson is what we call a Francophile, or somebody who really loves the country of France. What happens in the election? George Washington decides he's not going to keep running for government anymore. He's going to go retire. And this was a shock to a lot of people because he could have been elected as many times as he wanted. But he says, look, we need to learn how to do an election while I'm around to try and help. But more importantly, we need to learn how to have leadership who's not named George Washington. From that point forward, every president in American history stepped down after 2 terms. There was no law against it until the 1950s. And then in the 1930s, Franklin Delano Roosevelt gets elected twice. And then right before it was time for him to step down after a 2nd term, World War II erupted. And so Franklin Roosevelt actually got elected 4 times. He was not seeking power. He was not trying to be a king. He just, he didn't want to leave when he was the only person that knew what was going on in World War II. He actually died as a result of getting elected the 4th time. He died 1 year into his 4th term. His doctors told him, if you keep doing this incredibly difficult job, you're going to die. And he got elected anyway to lead us in World War II. It was kind of a brave thing for him to do. After Franklin Roosevelt, we added an amendment to the Constitution, making it so you can only serve 2 terms. So it's now illegal to run for a 3rd term, but up until Roosevelt, people just didn't do it because it was a tradition. Again, precedent means something people do, and then after that, everybody else does it too. Thomas Jefferson ran for the Republican Party. John Adams runs for the Federalist Party, not Alexander Hamilton. It comes down to the votes. The Federalists win by a slim margin. But during the 1796, here's one of the weird things. We talked about this in class the other day when you weren't here. Whoever got the most votes got to be president. Whoever got the second most votes got to be vice president, which means in today's world, in the year 2022, Joe Biden would be president because they got the most votes, but Donald Trump would be vice president. And that's a terrible system because these people are diametrically opposed. They don't agree on anything. As a matter of fact, by the end of that election, they both really didn't like each other. And this is also true of Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. They ran a nasty campaign, and they end up being in the White House together, having to try and work together. So, get back there. Adams is going to win, and Jefferson's going to be his vice president, and they're going to have a really rough presidency. John Adams is going to have a terrible presidency. First off, he's not George Washington. Everybody wants him to be as good as Washington. He's just not George Washington. Secondly, he's got Thomas Jefferson trying to stop him every step of the way, because every time Adams introduces a Federalist policy that makes the government stronger, Jefferson tries to get it stopped. Okay? How much can he do? Not much, but he is the president of the Senate, so he can get the Senate to hopefully not pass the stuff. But we're going to start out a really rocky 3rd term of a president, 1st term for Adams. All right. Section 3, we'll get some of this done. So Section 3 is going to be dominated by a war between Great Britain and France. Obviously, how does that affect us? Well, they're our 2 best friends. France helped us win the Revolutionary War against England, but England is our biggest trade partner. And generally speaking, when your 2 friends fight, you should stay out of it. The problem is, we tried to stay out of it, but both of them wanted our goods, and both of them really didn't want the other side to have our goods. So we're going to get pulled into this conflict. To understand what's going on, though, we have to go back a little bit and realize that the British are still in the forts that they should have left after the Revolutionary War. So we're going to deal with Great Britain. The Treaty of Paris, which ended the Revolutionary War, gave all of this land to England and said that England has to leave those forts. When do they have to leave those forts? Well, here's the problem. A very terrible legal line said they have to leave it within a reasonable amount of time. Now, it obviously is going to take some time for the word to get all the way over there that they have to pack up and leave, and then they have to pack up, and then they got to go to Canada. A year or 2 would be expected. 10 years later, Great Britain's still in the forts. Now, what did we do about it? Nothing, because this is the Articles of Confederation time we're talking about here. We couldn't do anything about it. Now, we passed a constitution. We got a president named George Washington. We got an army. Okay, we can kick them out. And we do. And they leave once we sign the Constitution. But before that, for these 10 years, they hilariously, as far as Great Britain's concerned, oops, wrong button, they give as many guns and ammo, as much ammo as they can to the Native Americans, knowing that the Americans' goal is to move out west. So as we move out west, instead of facing Native Americans who are poorly armed and not very organized, we end up facing Native Americans who have everything they need to fight us. And they're going to be outnumbering us because we got some pretty large tribes out there. Native American tribes are hundreds of thousands strong, some of them out here. When we head out there, we find Native Americans who are angry about Americans saying, hi, dear Potawatomi tribe, you're on my land. Native American tribes didn't generally believe in ownership of land. They felt that nature belonged to everybody or nobody, really. So for us to show up and say, hi, get off my land was ridiculous to them. So they started fighting us. And American settlers who were just farmers, and had nothing to do with anything, and were certainly not the Americans that had been fighting the Native Americans before, find themselves being attacked out of nowhere by the Native Americans. So this seemed barbaric to the American settlers because they didn't do anything to these people. But to the Native Americans, it had nothing to do with who you were. It had to do everything with what you were doing. So George Washington, of course, has a choice. He's got to protect these people. They're Americans. They're on American land now because we won this land in the Revolutionary War. And now we're facing large groups of Native Americans, not just a few here and there. They're starting to work together. For Native American groups to work together shows how terrified they were or angry they were, because Native American tribes, generally speaking, didn't work together back then. We like to treat them as one group, but there were hundreds of tribes who didn't speak the same languages and oftentimes warred with each other. They didn't get along at all. So for them to work together against us shows they're very angry and or very terrified. So despite the fact that the Native Americans were resisting us and attacking the settlers, we still moved out west in the droves. The Americans believed that we were going to end up controlling America from sea to shining sea, from the Pacific Sea to the Atlantic Sea. So moving out west was natural. It was where the cheap land was. A lot of immigrants who came from Europe didn't know anything about Native Americans. They got to America and immediately moved out west. So the Native Americans are just going to get outnumbered eventually. But the first time that we start moving out there, they organize and they fight us. Okay, the Native American tribes south of Ohio and Kentucky and Tennessee sold their land to the U.S. government, got whatever money they could, and didn't resist. The ones north of the Ohio River decided to fight. Now, how are they going to fight? They're going to get together, and actually, for what is Native Americans, a large army. Okay, Washington's going to send out troops from the federal government to fight off these Native Americans and teach them a lesson to stop attacking American settlers. Again, we underestimate them. We don't know that the British have been arming them. We also don't estimate that their ferocity and how hard they're willing to fight. A couple of Native American tribes, the Shawnee from Indiana area and Miami from the Miami of Ohio area now, put together a coalition. They're led by these two guys, Blue Jacket and Little Turtle. Native Americans tend to name their children after their personalities or what they love or what they like when they're younger. So they have what we would consider non-traditional names, but to them it's extremely traditional. And Blue Jacket and Little Turtle wipe the field with the American army that comes out there. This is like an actual trained army. This isn't just a bunch of militiamen. And the Americans get absolutely destroyed. 900 Americans die. This is like fighting the British in the Revolutionary War level. Okay, and the Native Americans don't have cannons and stuff. They're just better than us. So George Washington has a choice. Do we give up and come back, or do we fight harder? And we decide to send another army out there under this guy's leadership. His name is Mad Anthony Wayne. Anthony Wayne, mad meaning like crazy, not angry. He was a Revolutionary War general. He was really good at his job. He goes out to fight the Native Americans in a big open field that's called Fallen Timbers. And it was called Fallen Timbers, another sign that the Native Americans have woken up to us. The Native Americans chopped down a bunch of trees and put them all over the battlefield, and then left some trees up to hide behind. And they did this so the American cavalry, the horsemen, riding in on the horses, couldn't navigate in the field because of all the trees. They also hid behind some of the fallen trees, hid behind some of the trees standing up, and really should have destroyed us. They were showing us that they're not the savages that we considered them. Unfortunately for the Native Americans, and fortunately for America, Mad Anthony Wayne's really good at his job, and he ends up defeating them anyway. And his defeat gets them to sign the Treaty of Greenville, and the Treaty of Greenville gives us Ohio. And Ohio, the state of Ohio, is where we really wanted to settle at this time period. From Ohio, which is going to become the next state to the Union, we're going to spread out to Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois. So once Ohio is lost to the Native Americans, the rest of those states are in trouble. And the three tribes of Michigan area, called the Three Fires tribe, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Chippewa, or Ottawa, Odawa, Ojibwa, and Potawatomi, all signed treaties with the American government very quickly because they learned the lesson. Even if we defeat the Americans, they're coming back with more, right? There's no win here. So I would rather live, and they get to keep their land until later when they were forced off it. But they didn't have to fight the Americans, and the Americans got along with the Potawatomi and the Odawa and the Chippewa really well. All right, that's the farthest we're going to get. I'll let you know when we got more video and we can get more done. I hope to see you soon.